What is up everyone and welcome back. I hope you're having a great day, and in this episode we will go from our not so user-friendly 2D array to change the level into something like this, where we just drag the mouse and change the tile whenever we want to whatever tile we want. So let's get that going. But before we get going, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. And also follow on Twitter if you want to ask any questions about the game. Thanks. What we need is a new user interface down at the bottom of our current view with buttons that can do what we need it to do. So what we will start with is to create a new user interface part or a new user interface class called Bottombar. So what will this Bottombar have? It will have a private int x, y, width and height to begin with. And we're gonna start with that. We need a constructor that takes in all of these variables. And this Bottombar also needs a way of drawing. So we say draw graphics g, and we import the graphics g library. And in this new method we can say something very simple, such as setting the color, set color of course, set color, new color. Let's see if I can find a good one. I'm using GIMP as a helper here just to see the values for red, green and blue. Here, red, green and blue. So let's get maybe an orange color. So 220, 123, 14. So let's write that down. 220, 123 and 14 or 15. It's closer to 15. And import that color class. And then we say g.fill rect x. Yes. Entire size of the Bottombar. And now we need to implement it in our playing scene. So in our playing scene, we say private Bottombar, not but, Bottombar, and we will only have one of these, but importing it. And we say Bottombar equals new Bottombar. And first let's increase the size of our panel or game, what is it called? Game scene? No? Game screen, that's what it's called. Because currently it's 640 times 640 and we need it to be bigger. So how high should, or how big should the window be? Let's go by 740. So 100 pixels, we can increase it, of course. But let's see how it looks. Let's comment that out and just see how it looks. I think, yeah, that's a good start. So let's begin with 100 in height. And we say starting position is 0. The height will be 640 where it starts, and it will be 640 in width and 100 in height. Yes. And in our render method here in playing, we say Bottombar.draw. So if we run it now, we should have an orange Bottombar in playing, and we do. So we now have the Bottombar added and drawing. Good. And now we would like to move the button menu into our Bottombar here. And we will of course have more buttons, but we'll start with moving the menu button into our Bottombar. So let's go ahead and solve that. And we bring up our Bottombar, we take our menu, just Control X, and all that's red we will not have any buttons in the playing, as I don't think so at least. So we might as well take it all, and then we take init buttons. What else? What else? We need a draw buttons. Yeah, because we will have many buttons. So let's bring it in. And the draw function for draw buttons as well. After the body, or we can say background. Buttons. All right. And now we need to add all of these functions inside the button bar, because we will use all of them. And the way we do that is simply copy. We'll still need them in here, so we copy them, move them in here. And we can remove the override because this is not a scene. The button bar is not a scene. We could implement it or add it as a scene, but it's not really a scene, so we remove it. And then we can remove all of this code here. We will change it up how it looks. All right, so everything looks like it's working right now. Let's run it again. And the menu is of course not in the correct spot because we still have the same position. So we say 642 and 642. So we have some sort of offset from the corner. So let's run it again. And why is it gone? Because I'm stupid. It's supposed to start on 2, not 640. 640 is out here somewhere. That looks much better. Perfect. But as we can see, we can't hover, we can't click it. So let's fix the functionality of the button. And to implement the functionality of the button, there's a few different ways, but we only care to check anything inside this button bar if the mouse is below this line here. So this is 640 in Y. If the mouse button or the mouse is above here, we don't need to check anything in here if the mouse is hovering over it. And we do that by going into our, let's start with mouse move, that's the most visible. So we should say if Y is more or equal to 640, which is the line for the button bar, we go into button bar.mouse moved XY. And if it's not else, then we're still in playing, and we will add code here, but let's remove that for now. And we do the same for all of them. Mouse clicked, mouse pressed, but not mouse released, because it doesn't matter if you're releasing the button above or below. We want to reset the mouse over and pressed and so on. So mouse clicked in mouse clicked, mouse moved in mouse moved, mouse pressed in mouse pressed, and mouse released in mouse released. Perfect. So let's start it up and see if mouse over works. It does. Can I press it? I can. Can I click it? I could. All right. The simplest part of this episode is now complete. Just moving the mouse button, getting the button bar working. But now we want our buttons for each of the tiles we have. Currently we have only tile manager. We only have 3 tiles. We have grass, water and road. So it won't be too difficult. But we will not add them manually. We'll just loop through this array and then add them. So let's go in our button bar. We will need a playing in our constructor. So we say, so we can reach the tile manager, this. And then we say private playing. We import the class. We say this.playing equals playing. And we need to store all our buttons in a array list. My button. Tile buttons is a good name. New. So now we have somewhere to store the buttons. Import, yes, thank you. But in here we say we need to loop through the tile manager, but we will not be able to reach the tile manager because we don't have a getter in the playing. So we say public tile manager get tile manager return tile manager. There we go. So now we can access it. And I'm going to use a new type of loop. It's called an enhanced for loop. Our loops thus far look like this. Say 10, and then I plus plus. And this is nothing new. This is a normal for loop. But an enhanced for loop looks like this. In our case, we will say tile, and we will loop through playing.get tile manager dot tiles. And for every iteration, we will do something. Here we say what type of object we want to go through, and here we give it an array that we need to loop through. So it's the same. They have some pros and some cons. Tile buttons dot add. You could use a normal loop, of course, but this helps out a little bit, or makes it a little bit easier. We say new, come on, my button, bum. So a new button needs a name, but we have no way of getting the name of the tile. So, and we also need an ID, I think. So let's go in our tile class and change it up. Currently our tiles only contain a buffered image. We also want it to contain an integer, which is the ID, and also a string for the name. So let's save it. Private int ID, private string name. And we need an ID to be able to get a specific tile now when we're going back and forth, and also a name for the name of the tile, which will be useful, most likely. It's just good to have. If we don't need it, we can remove it later. Name equals, and I'm lazy, want refractor, generate, getters and setters, name and ID. Boom. And we don't need a setter, and we don't need a setter for that either. We just need a getters. All right. But now we got an error in tile manager, and it needs a int.id equals 0. And ID comes first, so it's a image, then ID plus plus, so we always increase it every time we use it, and also the name, which is grass. This is the grass one. So let's do that for all of them. Water, ID plus plus, road. So now they all have an ID and a name. Perfect, now we can use it. So back in our new enhanced for loop, in our Bottombar, we can remove the I'm gonna keep it so you can see the difference, but I'm just gonna remove it. And here we say, and every time we go through a new iteration, this variable tile will always be the new tile in that array. So we don't have to access it by going .get and then pass in an ID. We simply say tile, because this is a new one for this new iteration, get name. And we will say for position, we're gonna add position later. So we just say something 700 and then 600 and what else? 650. Let's go 650. And width will be 100. No, that won't be 100. We say 50 and 50. I think that's good enough. Yeah, and then we can add variables for size later and position, but we just need to see if it works. And in our draw buttons method, we say, we make a new enhanced for loop. My button B, we get the tile buttons dot, nope, not dot, then we say b dot draw. So it's much cleaner if you only need to access it and don't care about the position so much and etc. So now if we run this, cross your fingers, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. It doesn't. Why doesn't it do that? Because I did the same stupid thing again. 700 is far off the screen. Let's go 50. And let's restart it and hope for better now. Yes, we have our button, even though it looks in a poor design. Say 150. No, that's too far. 110. Let's run this again. Quit the last one. All right, now it doesn't overlap. Yeah, that looks good for now. But currently all of them are in the same position, so we need them to be spread out. So let's do that. So the size was 50 in width and a 50 in height. And the X start is equals 110. The Y start equals 650, and the Y offset could be something like, we just cast it on into an integer. We say width, no, not Y offset, X offset. We're not going to use Y offset right now. So we say width times 1.1 float. So now it will be 10% bigger than the width. So the first one starts on 50, the next one starts on 105, I think. So we say X start, Y start, width and height. But in X, we say X plus X offset times I. We're actually gonna use an I here. And I always increase. If we save this now and run it. Looks better already. Now, since this is pretty pointless, we don't know how grass looks, we don't know how water looks or road looks. So instead of having a blank or a white background with a name in the middle, we're simply going to make some adjustments to the buttons. Draw tile buttons G. And then we make a new method for that. Remove that, paste it in here. And we're not gonna say button draw, we're gonna say make it like so, and then we say g.draw image. We need an image. But how do we know which image to draw if we don't have an ID in our button? So we need to add a ID to our My button. If we add a ID right here, int ID, we would have to change all buttons thus far to implement an ID that most likely will never use an ID. We will never use ID for our menu button or our settings, and in our menu these buttons will not have any use for an ID. So how do we change that without having to change so much code? We do something called creating. In Java you can create more than one constructor as long as one of the constructor is, as long as they are different. And here we say ID. So now we have two constructors. We can create it this way or this way, and just put some comments here for normal buttons, and this one for tile buttons. And up here we also add a ID, but if the ID is not set here, we simply say this.id equals -1. And you can put whatever value here, but it's highly unlikely we will go in the negative when we loop through, so this, just make sure we don't get any weird bugs. You probably don't even need to give it a value, because we will never access the ID for the normal buttons. but this just ensures that we don't get any weird crashes or bugs. But in our tile buttons, we say this.id equals ID. We need a way of getting our ID, public int get ID, return ID. So ID is now set, then we go back into our draw image, and in here we say, it's gonna be a very long text, so we say get put image b.getID, and we make a simple getter here to save us some size. Public offered image get but image int ID. We need to import this class, of course, and then we say playing dot get tile manager get sprite ID. Boom. Oh, we need to return it as well. So instead of having all of this text in here, we just make a quick method and it looks a little bit cleaner. And for position, we do have button.getBounce getX, but that's a very long text as well. And we can change it by going public for the variables here. So instead of saying get, we say button.x, button.y, button.width, and button.height. And we need nothing or null for that one. And if everything looks right, it doesn't. Why are you red? And so. That looks better. Let's give this a try. If everything works, we should have images instead of the blank boring buttons. And we got some serious errors. Of course, I forgot to give it an ID when we create the tile buttons. So they're -1. It said index -1 out of bounds for the length of 3. So we say I when we create it. So now they all should have an ID and they should match. And make sure you increase I on the correct spot and not there. Let's just remove the ++ and say I++ in the end. Because here we had 0 and then we ++ and then give a 1 and then get 2 and 3 and the size is 3. So no wonder. Okay, 3rd time's the charm. It works. Perfect. Now when we got our tiles added into the bottom bar, we need to make the tiles into actual buttons that we can click, press, and something happens when we do it. But that must be for the next part of this episode. I had to split this into 2 parts because the entire episode would have been close to about 50 minutes, which is far too long for an episode. The next part will come out 1 day after this one, so remember to subscribe so you don't miss it. And hit the like button if you enjoyed this or learned something. But until the next update, I wish you all a great day and I hope to see you in the next episode. Take care. Bye.